Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Hobby Vomit. So this is Ian, and this is kind of a fun time for me. I think this is maybe the first time I have ever recorded at dawn. So the light is breaking just outside, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to be doing the Weekly Retch this week, and I'm very excited for it. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first things first, I do a few things a little bit differently than Matt. I like to go ahead and add video games into the video games category and TV shows into the movies category because I don't watch as many movies, but I do watch TV shows. And I don't play as many board games as Matt, but I do play more video games. So I like to add those into the mix. Now, we're not going to go through them exhaustively because I do play some video games that would be boring to list every single week, like League of Legends, for example. Got to get my daily dose of stress, right, through that game. But no, we're going to get into some of the other ones because there's been some really, really fun video games that we got to play this week. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the movies and TV shows category, go into books, and then go into movies. And we're going to cover the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Now, as a precursor, the last couple of weeks have been some of the toughest weeks for me for work because I teach at the University of Tulsa. I'm a professor, and we just went into our midterms. And so we completed those and got those graded this past Friday. We're now going into spring break, which is really exciting. But I was giving my students exams 2 weeks ago, which means I was helping them prepare 2 weeks ago. And I was grading it and doing all the review this past week, and we had to get all that turned in. And so it was a really, really busy couple of weeks, but we managed to squeeze in some time for things here and there. And so let's go ahead and recap it. So in terms of books, I think the last time I did a Weekly Retch, the books I was focusing on were things like Mistborn and Leviathan's Wake. We had completed Mistborn, but we had to put Leviathan's Wake on pause because some other books have come up that I've had to turn my attention to. So Matt and I are really interested in doing like the Book of the Malazan, I think is how it's pronounced. Which is I started reading Gardens of the Moon, which is the first one of that, and I'm through part 1 and I'm working through part 2. And now that we're coming to spring break, I think I'll actually be able to finish this week, which Matt is very excited about because it means we'll be able to start the next one, which I think is called Dead House Gates or something similar to that. I'll have to look into it again. But we're kind of thinking we're probably going to do the entire series. And frankly, I'm really excited for it. Right, I'm only through part 1, and I don't want to give spoilers on it as well because if you are interested in a fantasy novel and kind of a different kind of fantasy novel, I would heavily recommend this. Now, to give just a little bit of context, though, I'm someone who really, really enjoys fantasy. I grew up on fantasy, but I actually found that I really enjoy sword and sorcery, specifically that kind of fantasy where magic is a little bit more of a soft system, not a hard system. Magic's a bit scarier. Magic's actually a bit of the problem, not cases where magic is like the solution to everything. So, for example, in Mistborn, even though magic is somewhat rare, magic in that book is very much a hard system. It's very much a high fantasy because magic is used to solve every problem. Or you might take other cases like D&D or even a lot of the video games you might play. Like if you're playing Skyrim as a mage, right? You're playing very much a high fantasy. Magic is your solution. I like it when magic's not always the solution, but actually part of the problem. And I found out that I really love that when I started reading The Witcher. I was like, man, this is really cool. And I really love that again, going into Malazan. I asked Matt, like, what is this Gardens of the Moon book going to be like? He's like, it's fantasy. I'm like, that's a wide range. So what kind of fantasy is it? Is it like high fantasy? Is it low fantasy? His response was, I think you just need to read it. Because he's like, it's kind of a little bit of everything. And so I started reading it, and I really, really like it. So it's actually a bit of a Greek epic mixed with a low fantasy / sword and sorcery, which is really, really cool. So it's a Greek epic in the sense that gods are involved in the world, people are God's playthings, but it's this sword and sorcery because magic is very dangerous. Magic is part of the problem, and magic is not your solution. Most oftentimes, it is your conflict. And so we kind of get to focus on these vignettes of various characters and their stories that transpire over many years. And it's very cinematic, and I'm all for it. It's really, really cool. And there's definitely pieces of it where Matt was telling me that this may have started actually as a D&D campaign, and I can kind of see it because there's these setups where we do these vignettes that we bounce between, and I'm like, man, this is exactly how I do my intros for D&D when I get to play RPGs like that. It's just you kind of do these vignettes to introduce characters and scenes. And so if you're interested in a fantasy series that has mini novels under its belt, if you're interested in a fantasy series that's going to be quite a bit different than your Guard Variety off-the-shelf fantasy series, and if you're interested in something that's a bit more cinematic, sword and sorcery, but has epic proportions, a book that's not going to hold your hand but just lets you enjoy the world, I heavily recommend a book, Malazan Book of the Dead, I think is what it's called, and Gardens of the Moon is the first book. That's been phenomenal. So putting a lot of time and attention into that one kind of means that Leviathan's Wake has kind of gone to the side, because then the other book I've been reading is Dungeon Crawler Carl, which was one that Matt recommended to me because him and Bree are going through that now. And so me and my wife, we're doing the same thing. My wife is Bridget, which is always kind of fun. Matt and Bree, Ian and Bridget, but they were listening to an Audible. We're listening on to Audible, and we're halfway through Dungeon Crawler Carl, and we're loving it. My wife runs a weekly D&D. I was the one who got her into that. We're listening to this, and it's so perfect. I'm totally for the humor. So if you want a sort of a dungeon crawler, so this is a lit RPG, but it's kind of a bit different than other lit RPGs in the sense that this one is very much aware of its own humor. It's aware of its own genre, and it's going to take that with glee and play up all of the classic memes of Dungeons and Dragons and other such RPGs. So I'm all for it. The humor is phenomenal. The story, there are periods where it can get a little bit slow in the transitions between conflicts, but for the most part, I think it's handled very, very well, and it's always leaving you kind of thinking about what's going to happen next. I think that's one of the nice things. There's always a thread moving forward. It's not just like we beat a monster and then that's closed knot, and then we got to start something new. It's like always continuing off of something that had been previously established. So I think the pacing of it has been really, really strong. So then the other thing is I've been, my oldest, I got 3 kids. My oldest is turning 6 in May. And so one of the things we've been trying to do is starting to read more chapter books. So books have been a common fixture of the household. My wife is a writer. She reads a ton of books. And of course, as a professor, I read a ton of books. I just happen to read a lot more nonfiction. But we were trying to get my daughter more into chapter books. So we've of course been reading with her for her entire life. She spends a lot of time reading. In fact, most of the time it's been really awesome because we're just teaching her to read herself. But she, when she was even a little bit littler, like she was like 4 or 5, she would take a lot of those children's books and she would just have us read them to her over and over, and she would memorize them. And so we'd catch her like reading the book to herself, like from memory for a lot of these shorter books. And of course she wouldn't remember it 100%, right? Like maybe like 80%. And she just kind of make up the rest of it based on the picture. It was so cute to see. But now she's starting to kind of read to herself as well, and so it's been really exciting. And we want to do chapter books with her. And when I say chapter books, I mean like longer books, right? Not like children's books. And so my wife has been reading Little House on the Prairie with her, and then we want to get into The Hobbit, so we'll probably start The Hobbit with her pretty soon. But one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to read to her the book that got me into reading fantasy. So a little bit of background on me. When I was a little kid, when I was going through elementary school, I did not like reading. I didn't want to read. Now, it wasn't that I didn't like reading per se. I was already really interested in like video games at that point, and I was really interested in movies, and was very much interested in people telling me about lore. I thought that was really cool. But there was just something about reading fantasy and reading fiction that I wasn't on board for. And I think a big part of it was my rebellious nature. I tend to get really obsessive about things and then go into them with a lot of energy, but I tend to really not like it when people tell me I have to do something, like tell me I need to be doing this. Of course, which was a common problem for sports because, video games were great. My parents were telling me to stop, like to not play video games. So I played them with more gusto, but they were telling me like, no, you got to play sports. You got to do it this way. And it was for my good. Like I look back and I'm really glad that they got me into sports. But I would say that I enjoyed sports so much more when I started playing Ultimate Frisbee, because that was a sport I chose to play. I wanted to play. But when I was growing up, it was like, no, play some baseball, play some basketball, right? And I was just like, basketball I got a little more on board for, and it was like, play flag football, and so I was just really rebellious against being told to do these things. And that's how reading was. It's like, oh, like you need to start reading. And then I went to school, and in my elementary school, they took the library in the school and they started putting stickers on all of the books, and the stickers would be color coded and every color would have points. And they were telling us that now you're part of this reading program. And so you've got to read a certain number of books, but it's going to be okay because you can choose what books you want to read, but you still got to read them. And if you choose the ones that have the wrong color, then you're not going to get really any points for it. So really it's sort of your choice, but sort of not your choice. And I was just like, I very much was like, I don't like this. Like, I don't like you telling me like what I should read, that I have to read. And so I was really rebellious. But when I would spend time with my grandparents, so my mom would take me, my mom and my dad would take me to Arizona to go see my grandparents. They'd take me and my sister. And in Arizona, there's this place called the White Elephant where you could go get books. And so we would go there, and my mom would always like scroll through things. And the whole thing was they were all used books. And so you could get them for like a quarter, you get them for like a couple of quarters, right? So it was really, really nice. Well, my mom was like earnestly trying to find me something that I would be interested in reading. And so while we were in White Elephant, she started to think about what kind of thing might he be interested in, right? Like, because I know he likes video games and stuff like this. And she started to get this idea that after looking at all the books, she's like, maybe I can get him into fantasy, but I just got to find the right book, right? So then later on, we're in this library in Arizona, and she sees this book on the shelf called Dealing with Dragons. She's like, ooh, I bet that might be kind of neat. So let's check that book out. It's by Patricia C. Reed, and it's part of a 4-book series. And she took it out. She was like, okay, this seems cool. It's about dragons. She didn't really dive into it too much more, but she was like, hey, it's a fantasy book about dragons. And so she was like, hey, I'm going to go and pick this up. And she handed it to me, and she's like, hey, Ian, you don't have to read this, but I saw it was a book about dragons, and I thought you might find that pretty cool. So, hey, maybe just give it a shot or just leave it by your bed. And so I was like, okay, thanks, Mom. And so we took that home. I think I was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade by this point. And so I was like, thanks, Mom. And so we take that home, and I started looking at it. And I was like, this is kind of neat. I mean, it's about dragons. I'll be willing to read it. So I started reading it, and so I started getting into it. And if you've never read this book by Patricia C. Reed, I think it's a phenomenal book. It's a great book for getting young ones into reading, because it is a traditional fantasy story. Specifically, it's a traditional type of not myth, but folklore. So it's got your princess, it's got your dragons, it's got your charming knights and things like that. So it's got all the classic archetypes of all of our favorite like princess stories, right? Which, of course, for me, I did like folklore, I did like myth, and my mom would read that to me at night. So that's kind of where I got my reading. And so I was interested in those kind of stories. It just didn't like being told to read, right? So I started reading through this, and it was very different, though. And this is what's fun about the book, is that it's very aware of the commonly used princess archetypes. And so it turns them on their head and makes fun of them. And so, for example, there's a scene early on in the book where the princess very much is like rebelling against her etiquette lessons, rebelling against all of the cordial lessons that she has to learn so she can be at court and so she can be a princess, because she, is one day going to marry a prince and they're going to rule a kingdom. So she's got to know all these things, right? And so during one of her etiquette lessons, she just gets fed up with it because they're going through the proper ways for princesses to scream should they be abducted by certain kinds of monsters. So it's like, how do you scream if you're being taken by a giant? How do you scream if you're being taken by a dragon? How do you scream if you're being taken by something else? And she's just like, this is silly. And it's just I don't know, like it's so much funnier going through it now as an adult, where it's so much funnier. I don't think I got all of the humor right in 2nd and 3rd grade, but it was interesting and different, which got me kind of hooked in. And you get to follow the story of this princess and through her adventures, and it was really, really cool. And so I read all 4 of those books. I had an absolute great time reading those books, and that launched me into fantasy. Then I started reading Redwall. I started reading Lord of the Rings. I got into The Septum series. I can't remember what that one's called specifically. It got into Rangers Apprentice. I started just reading tons of fantasy, and I was racking up points at school and things like that because I just read the books I wanted to read. And it just so happens that if you're reading like big fantasy books, those happen to have all of the right colored stickers. And so I scored like tons of points at school because of that genre. But that's what launched me into it, was kind of reading this book that was a little bit fresh, a little bit different. So Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. It's a 4-book series, all following the same set of characters. It's phenomenal. And I'm having a really, really great time reading that to my daughters. We're about halfway through the first book, and I'm excited to get into more of them. So I've been, again, been reading the Book of Malazan. I have been reading Dealing with Dragons. I've been listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl. And if we get some more time that opens up for this, then we are going to start the Dark Tower, because I have the Audible book for that one. It's like 7 hours. So yeah, just knock that one out. That sounds pretty cool. So we'll do the Gunslinger. So I'm excited for that too. And then I think we're going to get some momentum going with obviously with Book of Malazan. So I'll have to see when I can open up some time to get back to Leviathan's Wake. I'm thinking that maybe after Lent is when I would do that. So I practice Lent. I'm Catholic. And so for Lent, I always try to read a particular book, specifically the Confessions by St. Augustine. So I'll be reading the Confessions during Lent and also trying to get more time in reading the Bible. So when Lent is over and we're done with the Confessions, we'll probably move over to Leviathan's Wake again. So I'd really like to get back to that. And so that'll put us closer to the summer, but that'll be perfect because then my workload will be a lot lighter. Okay, so then off of that, moving into movies and TV shows. So for movies and TV shows, I've been keeping up with our movie series that we've been doing for our movie discussions. If you've not seen those, I would recommend checking them out. It's been a lot of fun doing that. So the last one that we watched was The Real Pain, or Real Pain, sorry, which I thought was actually a phenomenal film. These are not the kind of films that you can watch, for me at least, not watch again and again and again, but it's good for a first watch. And I really enjoyed that one for a first watch, and it hit closer to home because the movie is featured in Poland. I've been to Poland. The movie features going through various sites that were affected by World War II, which of course is all of Poland, but specifically those monuments, specifically things like concentration camps. I've been there. I went through that same experience, so it was really exciting getting to do that. And watch that same experience for others through that film. And I thought the film did it really, really well. So I gave it a 5 out of 5. But if you want to know more, please check out our movie discussion on A Real Pain. The next one coming up is The Lighthouse. So I will be finishing that one today. I'm not a big horror movie fan, but I have seen The Northman by Robert Eggers. So I'm excited to see more of his work. And so I will let you know in the movie discussion how that one goes. Outside of that, I haven't really watched other movies other than the ones I see with my kids, which I've seen a lot, like Little Women, While You Were Sleeping, Frozen, of course, because I love Frozen. Stuff like that, of course, right, I've seen, but that sort of comes up as a part of being with the kids. But in terms of TV shows, so I was watching Night Agent, that is currently still on pause. That is just how rough it is for me when characters have a massive character break. It is very hard for me to jump back into that show while there's still other shows to watch. And then The Recruit, I was watching a little bit of, but I've only watched like the first episode or two, so I kind of put that on pause and I will come back to it at a later point as well. It's not had a character break. It's just, I'm just not really wanting a spy movie right now. I think that's part of the problem. Also, like watching Night Agent was like, that was kind of my spyish movie, and then we had this character break. So now I'm kind of just like, I don't really want a spyish movie. So I've been watching the Reacher, which came out with a new season. So I've kept up with the Reacher. I've enjoyed the first 3 seasons, or I think we're on season 3. I've enjoyed the first 2 seasons. I'm enjoying season 3. I really like it. I found some funny articles online. The Amazon Prime's The Reacher is, displaced by a brand new show that takes number 1, and it was Invincible season 4. I'm like, this is not a brand new show, guys. You can't have a new season of a show and so call it a brand new show. But of course, these articles can, because they're doing it for the clicks, I suppose. But I do actually want to watch the Invincibles, so I'll probably get to that at some point. But I've been watching Reacher. I really like Reacher. It is not these sort of like Sherlock Holmes detective-esque show that it maybe started out as. It's something a little bit different, but I like that they're trying to bring a new personality into each season to kind of give you something different while still maintaining, like, still being true to the characters. So I've been enjoying that. I never read any of the original works, but I have enjoyed the show that they've been doing. And so if you are kind of interested in a show that is more, I would say, action oriented, focusing on a character that has to work through sort of classic murder mystery or classic crime show situations, let's say, or a crime show story, but not being a traditional detective. That's essentially what Reacher is. It's just like taking all of your classic archetypes of, like, I'm going to be a cop out of water, so I'm in a new town, or I'm going to be investigating a cold case, or I'm going to be investigating a recent murder, or I'm going to be undercover. And so it goes through those kinds of situations, but just doing it from a perspective of a retired military police who's like now outside the confines of the law in some sense, because he's both skilled and knowledgeable. But it's fun, it's entertaining, and I enjoy it, so I'm here for it. And I think in terms of TV shows, that has been... Secret Level. So I watched and finished Secret Level. I thought it was phenomenal. There were certainly some episodes that were better than others. Some of the episodes were like, okay, whatever. But several of those episodes, especially the beginning ones, like, really slapped. And it was fascinating to me because I was reading up to see what people thought. And there were a couple that people watched that, like the Dungeons and Dragons episode, for example, and then the Space Marines, which was really good. And they're like, yeah, those are the only two that are worth watching. I'm like, no. Those two were awesome, but there are like 3 more that slap so hard and that actually like are trying to have an underlying message too. I think actually every episode has an underlying message, which is really cool. But like the Sifu one was, I think the Sifu one's my favorite. I think that's number 1 of them, because the message just hits so hard. So Secret Level, they're 10-minute episodes. Some are like 13 minutes. It is phenomenal. I would definitely go check it out if you you don't need to have seen the video game or played the video games to really get it, but it does help. But yeah, no, I would definitely check it out. It's really good. I enjoyed it a lot. So yeah, so Secret Level, and then watching The Reacher, finish that soon, and then maybe we'll see about revisiting some of this other stuff. So that brings us to close on movies and TV shows. So then last but not least, we go into games. So in terms of games, so let's talk about board games first, because that's traditional, and we've got some exciting ones up on the slate. So we have a new board game that came in off of Kickstarter, which was the Elder Scrolls Era of the Second Betrayal. Betrayal of the Second Era, if I can say this right. So it's BSE. So the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. So I haven't played Morrowind, but I do want to go back and play Morrowind. But I played Oblivion. I actually beat Oblivion several times. I played Skyrim. I have played a lot of Skyrim. And I've read their lore. I've read their stories. I've done their interviews of like how it got started and things like that. So I've always been a huge Elder Scrolls fan. I'm maybe not as knowledgeable about Elder Scrolls as it might be about something like Lord of the Rings, for example. But I am a huge fan of Elder Scrolls, and so I'm all for playing in that IP. This is a game by Chip Theory Games. As always, the production value is super high. The game is great. The rulebook, I think, has actually been better than my experience with some of their other games, and so I'm excited for that. There's still been a lot of rules checking, just because there's just a lot of edge cases that you hit pretty quickly. But that's been okay. We've been able to work our way through it pretty quickly. And the way Matt and I do it, because we're playing it together, is we kind of just say, look, how necessary is this to stop the game and go to Discord? And if we don't feel like it's absolutely necessary, we just like, okay, what feels good? And we just go off of that and we continue playing, and then we check it later. Usually I'm the one who goes and checks it later, and then I give Matt like a dump, like a paragraph dump of like, hey, these are all things we did wrong. If not more, sometimes it's like multiple paragraphs. But this is again a sort of classic Chip Theory games, but there's a cool element at the beginning where you're making your character, and you do that by setting up skill lines and setting up your dice pools, and they compete with each other. And so there's a lot of different interesting combinations. I'm having a ton of fun with this game, and so I actually really want to do a deeper dive on the game. I've been watching several reviews of it, and I'm seeing sort of the classic review content in terms of like, what did I feel about this game? How many hours are you going to get out of this game? I really want to do something a little different. I really want to do a review on what I think makes the game good, good and what is so interesting and fun about it, and what kind of experience it's going to provide you, and some like tips and tricks for playing the game and having a good time. So I want to do that kind of review for the game and kind of give my thoughts as well on why I think it's a good game, because I do think it's a really good game. Now, in terms of getting access to the game, I'm not sure what the right way is to go about it, because it was off of Kickstarter. I don't know if you can even purchase it right now. It is going to be a more expensive game because it's from Chip Theory, but it has been an absolutely great experience. I'm on my 4th playthrough right now. I did one with Matt as my first. I did 2 of my own, and now I'm on my 4th with him. And so I've gotten to play different characters and different classes and different settings. And so it's been great every single time. It is advertised as a 9-hour game, 3 sessions, 3 hours apiece. The first time we played, it took us 12 hours. We're still learning. I don't think it needs to be that. I think you can just play 2 sessions, like 5 hours, let's say. And so that's still a long game, but I don't think it needs to be 3 sessions. I think you can play 1 session and then play the final boss. It will take you about 5 hours, and I think that would be just fine. And it seems pretty easy to do that, so we'll just see what they come up with. But on the same theme, Matt introduced me to Hoplo Victorum, specifically called Quicktorum, because it has the quick start rules. And so we've been playing that on TTS. That's a solo player game, but we play it as a co-op, and we just kind of make decisions together. That one has been hilarious. I have been playing Krakenlance and kind of playing it as like a Russell Crowe gladiator, but with a bit more bravado. So when we started looking at the characters and Matt was like, who do you want to play? They recommended Krakenlance. I looked at Krakenlance. I was like, I'm going to pick him, and I'm going to play him like he's a captain from Shadow of Mordor, where, they walk in and there's all this stuff in the background of like, they're saying the person's name. Oh, sorry, we've got a sad kiddo. But they're like saying the person's name and shouting his name as he comes in. And so it's been really fun to kind of play this character with a lot of bravado, which is sort of out of the norm for me. So that one's been really cool. So Elder Scrolls, Hoplo, and then some of the, then we've been playing a lot of Dwarf Romantic. So I played a lot of Dwarf with my wife, played a lot of Dwarf with Matt, and then I've been playing Dwarf Romantic Sakura with my wife as well. We actually like that one even better than the original. So it's been awesome getting to play those. And so those have been kind of my focus for board games over the last couple of weeks. And then lastly, in terms of video games, so this last week especially has been awesome for video games. I have been playing it here and there to keep myself sane, just with all the grading and everything. So Monster Hunter Wilds came out. I've put in lots of hours with Monster Hunter Wilds over the past 3 weeks. And I absolutely love it. I liked the idea of Monster Hunter, but I never played Monster Hunter before this game. So I know that it's gotten a lot of criticism for various issues, graphics issues, performance issues. I personally have not experienced any of that. I'm on a 3080, which is, it's a higher end rig, but not, it's not a 4,000 or a 5,000. So it's not the highest end of rig, right? And I have had like zero issues with performance, graphics, or otherwise. So I don't know why so many people are having so many issues with the game. But I haven't had, I've had zero. So I don't know. But it's because it's been a really good experience for me. I think literally the only issue that I've had is there's a fight in there where the audio, sometimes I play the fight and the audio like has an issue. It hits this like high end of the audio, and it creates a static effect where it hits the high end of the audio, and then like it's like almost like whoever's trying to like generate the output like can't generate the tone. Basically, the clip of the audio like just doesn't get played right. And it's been through my speakers or through my headphones. So that's like the only problem I've had, and that's really not a big deal. It doesn't even happen all the time, and it only happens like in a specific fight, so I always know it's going to happen. Or that it will happen. And that's been it. That's been literally the only issue. Now, there is like a high texture pack that they provide. It's another like 60-something gigs on top of the base game. That thing is kind of garbage. It doesn't provide you that much better of a resolution. And it's 60 gigs. And it does have issues. But that's meant for like a 2K, 4K setup. I have a 1080p. So I'm not for that. And I'm not interested. I played it on high textures. I played it on medium textures. And it's great on both. So I don't know why I would need a higher end textures. So I would recommend avoiding that. And if that's the reason why people are having so many graphics issues, like please turn those off. Or maybe it's a 2K 4K thing, right? Maybe because I'm playing on 1080p, but a lot of people play on 1080p, so I wouldn't expect these many issues. But anyway, so I'm not sure where those issues are coming from, but I've had a great experience with it. I think it's phenomenal, and I love getting to play this game. It's been great. It's a great introduction for Monster Hunter, so I'm so glad. I really am personally glad that they made a game like this to help people like me who have always been interested in Monster Hunter but have never had a good starting game. And I've played a little bit of World, I've played a little bit of Rise. They're good, but they're not like this. Like they're not a great first Monster Hunter game, right? Wilds has been a phenomenal, great first Monster Hunter game. So if you've never played Monster Hunter, or if you're interested in Monster Hunter, like check it out. It's really good. So I've been playing that one. And then I've been playing Split Fiction co-op with Matt. Never played any of their games before. The other one I think was It Takes Two. Matt was like, this is probably one of the best co-op video games I've ever played. I'm like, okay, we've played a lot of good ones. So it's not Split Fiction, sorry. The It Takes Two is like one of the best he's ever played. And Split Fiction, I don't know how it compares because I never played the other one, but it's been awesome. The difficulty is like not the highest for sure. Like we're doing really well working through the game, but it's just fun. And it has this nice little bleed in with stories because it's about a fantasy story and a sci-fi story mingled together, which is really cool. The two main characters of the game are writers. And it also has a lot of head nods to like pop culture, and it makes a lot of jokes about popular books and popular stories and popular video games. And there's so many points where I'm like, can they even do this? Like, is this like violating copyright? But of course, it's all in parody, so it's all good. But it's been phenomenal. So I really enjoy that. It's a nice game that you can only buy one. You can buy one copy of and play for two people, which is really cool. So if you're interested in a co-op game and you want to play something that's going to be just really fun to play with like a partner or with a friend, and you just want to get a copy and both play it, like I would heavily recommend picking it up. You can just split the cost 50-50 if that helps. But it's a great co-op game, and you should definitely check it out. So we've been playing Monster Hunter Wilds. I've been playing Split Fiction. I've been playing Skyrim VR, as well as just other VR games with Matt, but I've talked about those. Been playing Skyrim VR. I have my own character story that I wrote based on my knowledge of Skyrim, and I've been playing through that character story. I wanted to do something a little bit different. VR Skyrim has brought a whole other element to the game. And so I've got the Fusro Da mod list, which has been awesome. Made it super easy to get started. And so I've been playing that, and it has been, I mean, it's crazy, like having so many hours in Skyrim and then just to play that VR and be like, wow, like this is like a whole new experience inside of Skyrim. It's crazy cool, like how it can just kind of bring a lot of life back into that game just by playing it in a little bit of a different way. But so I wanted to put a character story together. So I am doing a character story. I basically have these beats in my mind that I want to hit in the story. And so I play to those and just have fun in between. And so what I wanted to do with this one was that normally I will play characters that have, if they have a redemption arc, then we are on the redemption side of that arc. This time I wanted to play a character who goes to rock bottom and then has the redemption arc. So I am currently playing through their go to rock bottom phase. And so this kind of basically involves them like coming to Skyrim, getting caught, running away, wanting to pursue magic, crashing out, falling really low, getting involved in the Thieves Guild, getting involved in the Dark Brotherhood, right? And then having to bounce back from that and then become like Dovahkiin and then like save Skyrim and everything like that. So we are currently in the Dark Brotherhood part of the escalation. So we are essentially at rock bottom and now starting to kind of claw our way back up to redemption. So I've been really enjoying that. So if you have a VR headset and want to, if you want a super cool RPG experience and you can support it with mods on your computer and everything, Skyrim VR is where it's at. Just hands down, it's so good, and I'm excited to get to play other things like that in VR. And then let's see. So I did play a few other VR games. One that was notable I want to mention was Blade and Sorcery. That was a highly recommended VR game. I played it for 90 minutes. I refunded it on Steam. It's a very intriguing game, and for its physics, I think it's very good. It's a little bit weird though, because obviously I've been playing Skyrim and I really enjoy it. I don't think I can play Blade and Sorcery. Um, so in Skyrim, we are fighting things and it's very cartoonish. And very much like fighting things is about you playing this RPG and it's sort of the RPG thing. In Blade and Sorcery, combat is very much a part of this physics sim, like see what you can do in combat. But because of the fact that combat is a physics sim, we are also essentially playing a murder sim. And there are definitely elements of the game where they are trying to show you the cool physics that you can do by having you murder people in interesting ways, or like different ways. I shouldn't say interesting, but in different ways. So, and I know that you can frame it as like self-defense, but we crash land on a beach and like we have to work our way through. I do get that there's an element of self-defense here. But I don't need my game showing me the cool things it can do by giving me new ways to kill people, and especially not in VR. And so doing things like drowning people, for example, or throwing people off of cliffs, or like cutting people's throats. Like I don't need that in my game. Like I said, in Skyrim, yeah, we're fighting things, we're killing things. There are things that are humanoid. It's a lot more cartoonish. It is an RPG, so it's framed in very much like the cartoonish dungeon crawler fashion. Although there are a lot of monsters that you fight instead of just people. And Blade and Sorcery is very much like turn up the blood factor, turn up the violence factor, turn up the intention factor. You're not here because you're part of this like grand story. You are here because we want to show you the physics of killing people. And I get that that's like not the author's intent, but this is how it plays out. So I'm not here for that. I'm not interested in that. I don't want that in my life. And so we have refunded that game. And I'm sure there's people out there who are playing it and enjoying it, but I just can't enjoy something like that. So I had to turn it off and refund that one. So that one's out. But there have been a lot of really, really cool VR experiences. And so I'm excited to see what else we can find in the virtual space. And I think with that, I know we're like 36 minutes now, so it's time to start wrapping up. I think with that, I've covered all of the games and video games. So if you're interested in seeing some more content from the channel, please do check us out. We'll be doing another movie discussion here soon on The Lighthouse. In addition, I will have some board game reviews, and I think we're also going to have some more challenge playthroughs, things like Spirit Island, things like Primal. And I hope that you're looking forward to checking out the content. But we're looking forward to having you. And until next time, this is Ian. This has been Hobby Vomit, and I will catch you later. See ya.